Good morning, everyone, and you are all very welcome to the Women in STEM panel event as part of the Rediscovery Centre's Let's Talk Science Festival. This festival is funded by the Science Foundation of Ireland and supported by Dublin City Council, and we really appreciate their support in being able to deliver this event for you today. So listen, we're really thrilled to see so many people on the call today and so many people that have tuned in to join us. We have lots of students and secondary school, third level institutions and universities from all over Ireland taking part. We are streaming this event live to YouTube, so if you have any questions or indeed if you have any comments for our panelists, please do pop them into the YouTube chat and we will try to get to as many of them as we possibly can. We would also love to know where you're joining us from today, so remember to put in your location and the name of your school or where you're talking to us from in the chat as well, so that we know where you're coming from. So just to kick off, I suppose, my name is Sarah Miller and I am the Chief Executive here at the Rediscovery Centre. And I suppose I'm also a Women in Science, and just I suppose a little bit about my own background. I am a scientist. I have a degree in process biotechnology and a PhD in environmental science. And more recently, I also completed a master's, an MBA. And I'm delighted and privileged to have grown up in a developed country where I have been afforded the opportunity and access to education and been afforded the opportunity to work as a woman in a science-related field. I also have been surrounded by very strong female roles my entire life, my own mother included, and they have paved the way, I believe, for women like myself to excel in their chosen careers, regardless of what they are. So I think a big shout out to all the women that went before us. Our world is really facing some significant challenges, which we're all very much aware of. From climate change to infectious diseases, we have never faced challenges like this before. Science, technology, engineering, and maths can help us to understand how best to address these challenges and how to create solutions for a more sustainable future. Women's contribution to STEM is vital for the future, and unfortunately in Ireland, only 25% of the STEM workforce are actually women. Giving women an equal opportunity to pursue and indeed to thrive in STEM careers helps work towards equality. It enhances women's economic security and it ensures a diverse and talented STEM workforce. With equity, we will get a greater and a wider perspective on issues, which will ultimately lead to better products, better services, and a better future for everyone. We are absolutely delighted to have an amazing panel of women joining us here today for this event. Our panel includes inspiring women that are working in a varied STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths fields. So you are all very welcome here today. Joining us, we have Geisha Kinderman, lecturer of the Applied Ecology Unit at the National University of Ireland in Galway. We have Nikki Clear, Marine Support Officer at the Joint Nature and Conservation Committee. We have Fionnuala O'Reilly, Engineer, Science Communicator and STEM Advocate. We have Vicky Toomey, Community Lead at Yard and Advocate for Diversity in Tech. We have Elspeth Sinclair, working in Education and Public Engagement Officer for ICRAG, the Irish Centre for Research in Geosciences. And we have Mary Kahlan working as the head of the BT Young Scientist and Technology Exhibition. So you are all very welcome. What an amazing lineup that we have today. And we're not going to waste any time. We're going to get straight into the discussions. So first of all, we're going to start with Geisha Kinderman. As I mentioned, she's a lecturer at the Applied Ecology Unit in NUIG. She is in the School of Natural Sciences at NUIG, and she is director of the MSc in Environmental Leadership. She is also the academic coordinator for the MSc in Biodiversity and Land Use Planning. She's an environmental scientist with a great interest in the interrelationships between the environment, conservation, and human activity. She holds a PhD in environmental science, an MSc in ecosystem conservation and landscape management. Geisha has extensive experience in researching Irish environments, especially coastal areas, Working previously as a postdoc researcher with the Near Health Project, her current work in NUIG is focused on access to green and blue environments for health and well-being. Through various committees and working groups at NUIG, she is embedding a holistic approach to sustainability in research and learning across higher education. Geisha, you're really welcome. Thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you very much for having me, Sarah, and thank you for the very lengthy introduction.
Well, there's a lot to tell. A very accomplished woman indeed. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your career path. So perhaps, share some experience with us. Have you had any first-hand experiences of difficulties faced as a woman entering into STEM within your academic background? And maybe how did you overcome that, or share that?
No, I'm very happy to share that, and thank you for asking me to do so. As you said, I've had several degrees in environmental fields, and I'm really lucky to get to work in this area. And I was delighted that after I finished my master's degree that I had the opportunity to do a PhD, which I absolutely loved, where I looked at coastal areas and kind of recreational activities in them, the impacts on them. And I was delighted that when I finished my PhD, just a few months later, I was offered the opportunity to start work at the university. It was a dream come true. Super fantastic situation where I got to carry out research at a university, where I got to teach others about environmental science. And as I said, ideal opportunity for me. I was delighted. So my initial entry into STEM was definitely easy. I couldn't have asked for more. Yeah. Except that I was researching and I was teaching and I was running master's courses and I was contributing to committees. I was doing the exact same things as some of my colleagues, except that I didn't have the same title. At the time, I wasn't a lecturer, but I was doing the same job that lecturers were doing. And it didn't really seem fair. So it was something that I thought I'd look into. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized that I didn't have the same opportunities as my colleagues had, who were lecturers. I didn't have the same recognition. And I didn't have the same career prospects. I didn't have anywhere to climb up that ladder. So as I said, it seemed incredibly unfair. The more I looked into it, the more I realized I should do something about it for myself, because I didn't think it was right. And I got talking to colleagues who were very supportive. They were great. But I also got talking to other women and realized that a lot of other women were in a similar situation to me at my institution, but also in other places. They were doing the jobs that other people were doing, but they didn't have the same recognition. And while initially, when I started on this journey, I felt quite alone. I was wondering whether I was doing the right thing, whether I was really asking for too much to get the same recognition. I all of a sudden realized that, no, I wasn't alone and I wasn't wrong, because the same was happening to other people. And it's something we should do something about. So the further I went on this journey, the more people I encountered who were in similar situations, who'd overcome similar situations. And knowing that I had their support emotionally, because it was an emotional journey, as well as kind of a bureaucratic nightmare in some cases, having people who were in the same boat really, really helped. Because also I was all of a sudden not just fighting for myself, but also for them, which made it much easier. And I think in particular, without them and their support, I would have given up. It took years to get the recognition that I have now, to get to be in the position that I am in, and to get to have that job that I really, really wanted, to be the lecturer that I wanted to be. But it wasn't an easy journey to get there. It took, as I said, a very long time, but it's definitely thanks to the support from others that I got there. But without them, I definitely would not have continued and I would have given up. So it wasn't, after the initial easy start, it definitely wasn't necessarily an easy journey, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I don't think that's necessarily a unique story either, unfortunately. It's great to hear how you addressed it. And I think that whole, opportunity to collaborate with other people in the same position, that whole idea of strength through numbers is really important and is a very powerful tool. No doubt we'll come back to that. I'm just going to move on now to our next speaker.
Please do.
And I'll come back to you again, Geisha. Thanks very much. Nikki, we're joined now by Nikki Clear, originally from the lovely Limerick. Nikki moved to the UK after secondary school to study and work in the marine conservation sector. After graduating with a degree in animal biology, she spent several years volunteering for charities and research projects all around the UK, Ireland, and the Isle of Man. She then worked in a local nature conservation NGO in Cornwall for 8 years as a marine conservationist. She is a huge advocate for the power of people and communities in conserving and creating a more sustainable society. Her current role is with the GNCC, a government agency, the JNCC, government agency providing scientific conservation advice to the UK and devolved governments as well as internationally. Nikki's passion and dedication for the protection of the natural environment has been her life goal, and she is currently undertaking a master's in marine biology and oceanography. So thank you, Nikki, for joining us. Maybe you could tell us about your journey and what difficulties or barriers you encountered in entering into the STEM workforce.
Hello, thank you so much for having me, and it's really nice to hear Geisha's story as well, so thank you for sharing, Geisha. I suppose my journey is a little bit different. I left college in Edinburgh and I started a journey looking for a career in conservation, which is, to be honest, a very competitive field. It's one of these things that you need experience to get experience. So it's this kind of catch-22 situation. So I spent about 4 years working, building up money, and then going off and volunteering in these amazing projects, like tagging basking sharks in the Isle of Man and looking for whales and dolphins around Cornwall, and intertidal ecology in West Cork. I've been really lucky, but it's been a tricky journey. It's been a really challenging journey. And after years of many rejections and like when you start to get kind of 40 rejections in a row, even just for volunteer positions, it can be tricky to kind of keep the motivation going. But again, similar story, without the support of my friends and my family and my own passion and grit, determination, I couldn't let myself give up. So I kept going, and I've been really lucky to find myself in following a career that I feel really passionate about. But in terms of challenges, I think I'm quite lucky in marine conservation. It's well dominated by amazing women in this field. So I've had some incredible mentors and friends who've kept me going and been a real inspiration. But I think one of my main barriers is the fact that I'm dyslexic. So I find reading and writing more difficult than others. And I've, for a very long time, and it's only really recently, I'm starting to see this as an actual strength. So actually, dyslexia gives me, the way my brain works gives me the ability to see trends that other people might miss. It gives me the ability to look at a problem or look at an object or something from many different perspectives, which is more tricky for neurotypical people. So I'm really starting to embrace what I once thought was a weakness as one of my strengths, and this is what's kind of gotten me through and really inspired and kind of led my career really. While working down in Cornwall, I almost kind of fell into a love for data and maps and analysis and this kind of thing. I never thought I would enjoy this, especially in because I really struggled in these subjects in through school and university. But working with data that you understand, that you've collected, it's a completely different experience. And this is kind of that was a real kind of beginning of my career, and I'm really grateful for everybody who's kind of supported me along the way. So yeah, I think that's kind of my story.
Wow, thank you so much. And I have to admit to being a little bit jealous about your role in marine biology. I think it must be one of the nicest areas to work in. No doubt you feel the same by the sound of it. You sound very passionate about what you do.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely.
Thank you very much for sharing your story. And again, we're going to come back to that. I'm just going to move on now to Vicky Tumili, who's going to join us. So Vicky is coder, tech event organizer, and she advocates diversity in tech, and she's the community lead at Yard. Vicky is a software engineer, but she can be found nowadays organising community tech workshops and events with a focus on advocating diversity in the tech community. She has managed the Python Ireland user group since mid-May 2005 and has chaired 4 annual Python conferences. She was nominated and became a member of the Python Software Foundation in 2012 and also became a board member of EuroPython Society that year. She launched PyLadies Dublin in October 2013, and she is now the main organizer. She co-founded and is also the main organizer of Coding Grace, which runs language agnostic, diverse, friendly workshops and events. Games have always been in her interest, so much so that she co-founded Gamecraft Foundation to run community game jams so that people can connect, create, and collaborate. Her focus is to bring like-minded people together to grow and learn and support each other. So, Vicky, if I could just say hi and thank you very much for joining us here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. And it was great to hear from Geisha and Nikki, even though they're very different areas, but I can definitely relate to the support, especially from peers, your family and friends. But yeah, thanks for having me this morning.
Absolutely. So listen, the technology sector has been traditionally a male-dominated industry. So tell us about your career path and what you think has inspired more women, particularly of late, to pursue a similar career.
I graduated from University of Limerick in computer systems, and I went straight into the industry. So as I mentioned, I was being very lucky that I had very supportive peers at work, and as well as the tech community, as you mentioned earlier, that I have been organizing a lot of events, been involved a lot in the Irish tech scene, and this also I have to say a shout out to my husband, who has been all the way through very supportive, as he's in tech industry as well. So what really took off for me was getting involved and attending all these tech community kind of user group meetings that normally happens in the evening, and I get to meet people, and I get to find out what the lay of the land is, what's the amazing technology is happening, how are people using it. And as I mentioned, I ended up running the Python user group, which is a programming language, for over 10 years. And in that, I met, like meeting lots of people, get to find speakers, hear about all these cool tech, and then opening up to a lot of opportunities, not just for myself, but for a lot of people as well who go to these events. And out of this technology group, which is quite niche at the time, I've actually come across atypical jobs. So since working in the industry, I have moved into jobs like being a science being in science gallery. They hired me as a curator and a researcher for an exhibition called Gain in 2012, and that was one of the most amazing jobs I ever come across, because I got paid to read about games, play games, meet other people in the industry, go to festivals, and then being able to see and talk and be able to see the production team in the gallery come up with an amazing immersive experience at the end of all that research. It was just mind-blowing. To becoming most recently a maker advocate with Dublin Maker, who run annual festivals every year. And that was more going away from coding, but there's a kind of crossover, because it's code, you can code and have electronics, do stuff with electronics, and it's very accessible nowadays. And so it kind of increased my community even further, because I was learning. I was very much into coding, and then I was learning a lot more and was very curious about electronics. So I'm always trying to learn new things all the time, especially things like to do electricity. I hate being electrocuted, but I get to learn to solder, and I get to learn to put things together and make fun kind of creations, and also being able to learn and also educate people and teach people through workshops and events as well. And it's great to bring all the people who are interested in the same things I do. But yeah, I've besides Coding Grace, Gamecraft, and PyLadies, I was also brought in to help run events with Women Code Dublin as well. As you can see, there are a lot of groups here, and so there's a lot of peer groups, and I thought we only have a handful, but it's actually in Dublin alone, there's like in tech alone, there's like over 30 something diversity in tech groups, and there's there's a lot of support and a lot of people who want to talk about issues that they come across throughout the career, right from going through studies right up to career, and what if you want to change jobs or change different technologies, what to do, where to look for things, or if you're having issues, how do you handle it? And as a way, because I was involved so much in the tech community, it gave me a foundation to allow me to find all these come across all these weird and wonderful jobs. And my way of paying back was volunteering more of my time to this particular group called the Grants Work Group, as part of which is run by the Python Software Foundation, because Python has been around me for so long now, and it was my way of helped kind of screen grants, paying back, and for people who wanted to create their own events, who needed support and help from the beginning, because I know how hard it is to start from scratch, and wanted to create groups to help other people in your community. So this was a way for me to work with the group to help look through all these calls for help, and help subsidize all these groups and clubs to run their events.
Amazing.
So I'm very, anything to do with Python, it was like I was definitely would try and help and promote as much as I can, and this filters through to a lot of the areas of things that I do in my community events.
And even here today, you know, thank you once again, everyone on the panel, for giving back today and for joining us on this conversation. Great to hear that there's so much support there for diversity in tech. And we're going to come back to that topic of diversity. I'm just going to bring Elspeth Sinclair onto the call now. Elspeth is the Education and Engagement Officer at ICRAG, the Irish Centre for Research in Applied Geosciences. Elspeth specialises in the development, running and evaluation of high-quality public engagement activities. She is an experienced science communicator with a particular passion for engaging young people and females, identifying people within the sciences. Originally from the UK, Elspeth studied geography, physics and history at A-level, and her studies gave her the enthusiasm for science that she then eagerly pursued at university. Elspeth went on to study geology and geography at the University of Manchester and continued her studies at the University of Manchester, completing an MPhil degree in paleontology, specialising in the ecology of extinct ecosystems. Really interesting. Elspeth, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's wonderful. Listen, we're already over time, would you believe it? So I'm going to jump straight into the question. Did you always know you were going to work in science, technology, engineering, and maths, or what do you think needs to change to make STEM more accessible for women in general?
Okay, so sorry, I am just having a few technical problems with my sound.
No problem at all.
So hopefully that has sorted it out for you. So did I always know that I was going to go into science? Well, I was thinking about this one, and I think if you'd have asked me that just off the cuff, I would have said no. But having gone back through what I wanted to do when I grew up, it feels like there's always been an aspect of science in there. And I've been surrounded by really strong female role models my entire career. My mum, for example, is a professor at the University of Central Lancashire, and she's in science. My dad is also in science as well, like the brewing science industry. And yeah, there's just been loads and loads of really strong scientific people around me, and I think that helped to steer me towards where I've ended up. So yeah, that's a quicker answer to your question.
Super. And do you think there are challenges or obstacles there that need to be removed in order to make STEM more accessible? Or, you know, can you think of anything? I know this is a little bit off the cuff, but can you think of anything that might encourage more women into STEM?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one. So I am obviously in the geosciences sector. So that's kind of anything that's related to the Earth. So geosciences is kind of Earth science, whether it's underneath the surface of the Earth, whether it's the atmosphere, the cryosphere, biosphere, all of that kind of stuff, and also planetary science as well is included in there. So like you can look at the rocks of Mars, and that's still geoscience. So it's a really, really wide industry. And as a whole, I would say that I have never really experienced too much pushback certainly in my career in science communication. When I was at university, it was slightly different. It's very, very male dominated. And although at the time it didn't feel like it affected me, if I'd have continued in academia, I'm the sort of person that would have felt very outnumbered by it. And I think some of the things that Gesche was saying earlier about the way she was in a role doing the same job as other people with a different job title but being treated very differently rings very true. But one of the other things I would say about the geosciences is that there is a big movement at the moment to look into equality and diversity and inclusion. So, for example, an initiative started by members of ICRAG in Dublin, specifically Aileen Doran, is the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion in Geoscience organisation. And since then, it's moved on to become more of a global thing. And it really shows that people are taking this very, very seriously. And one of the things that's come out of, say, the surveys that we've done is that for want of kind of it's very sweeping, but the, say, older generation, the old guard of people, there are some opinions and mindsets that need to be changed. And I think there's a fear there of changing the way that it's always been, the way that everything has, like everything that you know. It's a difficult thing to do, and it is scary, but the way that we need to go in the future is changing the mindset of those that are still kind of holding on to those archaic views. But there is hope, because we're actively working to help. Kind of.
Excellent. And well done, ICRAG, for pushing that diversity agenda. I'm just going to ask Mari to come and join us. Mari Kahlan is head of BT Young Scientist and Technology Exhibition. Mari's role as head of the exhibition is a year-round role, and it's hard to believe that it's actually in its 57th year. She looks after the development and delivery of all aspects of the Young Scientist and Technology exhibition. She also has overall responsibility for fundraising, project management, and event management of the project from end to end. She is a direct liaison with partners, judges, the board, and internally with BT. The role also extends to all of the outreach, the marketing, the communications, and the development to recruit schools and projects to participate in the exhibition. So no mean feast. She has been national organiser for the European Union contest for Young Scientists for Ireland since 2005. And in 2019, she organised the 30th edition of the EU CYS in Dublin. Before her involvement in the Young Scientist and Technology exhibition, she held a number of roles in BT, and these included head of sponsorship and events for BT, and also head of events in Europe for BT. In 2015, she was named one of the 10 Bright Sparks Igniting STEM Communities in Ireland in the Silicon Republic. And in the same publication earlier that year, she was named one of the top 100 Irish women in STEM. In January 2021, she won the Founders Medal awarded by the board of the Young Scientist and Technology exhibition, recognizing her work on the virtual exhibition in 2021. Mari, thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thanks a million, Sarah.
So the Young Scientist, I can't believe it's been running for 57 years. It's totally amazing to know that, and it's such a wonderful exhibition. It's always been a really good entry point, actually, for STEM careers, we find anyway. Have you noticed a change in the entry level from women over recent years, or has it always been something that's of interest to women?
I think it's something that's always been of interest to women, but like we sort of track the numbers very closely every year, and it's the sort of the jump across categories or increases in categories as well. So we're seeing more girls get involved in chemical, physical, and mathematical sciences, which is one standalone category, and technology, and moving away from we're not moving away, but in addition to biological and ecological and social sciences as well. So like the trend has been for us for over a decade now that the participant levels are 60% girls and 40% boys.
Great.
Which is absolutely brilliant. But it is one thing I do say, and can be quite controversial on events like this, is we can't forget the boys as well. That success, because there is such a focus on girls in STEM, and rightly so. Mm-hmm. But we just need to make sure we continue the dialogue with all genders and across all school and ethnic backgrounds and everything else.
Mm-hmm. Super. And where are we with the exhibition this year? So tell us what's happening now.
So an increase in entries this year, which is always great. Last year was a bit of a strange one because we had to very quickly pivot to an online virtual event, which we did thankfully very successfully. And what we were able to do in doing that was introduce the BT Young Scientists and Technology exhibition to a global audience. It was one of the things I had set out in the early days when we were sort of looking at trying to change it and to put everything on a technological foundation. Yeah. And we did have visitors from 77 countries, which is absolutely brilliant. So it means that the young people that are taking part in the Young Scientist are now being noticed globally, but it also will give other people in other countries, and I think in developing nations especially, some ideas of what they can do with their own education systems or in science fairs like the BT Young Scientists Technology exhibition.
That's brilliant. Great. Okay, well, thank you so much, Mari. I'm going to hand over now to the audience, really, and look to see what questions are coming up on the chat. I know there's been a lot of questions presented, so I'm just going to see where we're at now. Jump in. Okay, so we've one there from Aisling. And I'm not sure who would like to take this, but maybe Mari, as you were just on the call there, do you know if women are better represented in some STEM fields than others? Or does anyone on the call actually know which STEM fields have a higher representation of women or a lower representation of women?
I think from what I've seen with the stats and others who are directly involved in the fields here will be able to tell me more. I think there are more probably in the biological side of things because it's a more accessible subject in secondary schools. We're beginning to see an increase in engineering, computer science and everything else as well, but that would be the way it was, and that's because of, as I said, the accessibility of those subjects at third level.
Great.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you because I see the same here at the university. When we're looking around the courses, we see more female students in the natural sciences, for example, in comparison to the likes of engineering, which is very much male dominated. In my own course, for example, now if I'm looking at it in the environmental field, we're looking at a 60-20 split, 60% women to 20% men in the classroom at this moment in time. And that is, as I said, environmental sciences. If I then go into an engineering group, it's pretty much the opposite way around.
Mm-hmm. And Vicky, I was just interested, I suppose I didn't ask you when we were talking, but is it predominantly male within the tech field? Do you find that?
Yes, it is. Okay. But in the earlier days, I think I didn't see it that way. I just put my head down and just went through and did my studies, and then I was trying to learn so much because it was very overwhelming when you get into the industry. It was so much stuff to learn that you just want to work and pick up stuff as much as you can, and you just don't notice around you that you probably are the only female in the team, or one of the very few, or when you go to events that you are the only one there. I only realize it as the years progress when I run events. Every time I see another female or another Chinese person, I really just jump at the chance to talk to them. I think I scare them away because I was the only one again the following month, that kind of thing. So you do, and then as I start advocating diversity in tech by running events, it came out of the fact that I didn't see anyone like myself. I didn't see any other females.
Yeah.
And it was always just me there. And I wanted to find there's other people going to all these other events, but why aren't they coming to these technical events? So, yeah. So you can see it. Yeah, I don't have the stats, but just for me attending things, I can just see a sea of just general tech. You can just see mainly majority males. It's getting better though. It is as we talk more about it.
Great. And we have a question in there from Julie Harrington, and this is for you, Mary. So as head of BT Young Scientists, you have a unique perspective on inspiring students and young people into STEM. What do you think is the best way to get girls and women more involved in STEM?
I think it happens at many levels, and I think we probably need to start looking back as early as primary school to get people involved, to get that love and that passion. There are some great programs within primary schools. There's something we're developing through an organisation I'm part of called Connecting Women in Technology. It's 22 tech companies, and we're looking at about how we can start talking about STEM at a very early age. So doing things like that, it's down to the sort of the environment people are living in. The school environment is one of the most important, that everybody is given an equal opportunity to education and to get involved in it. And there's so many other things like the Rediscovery Centre itself, getting involved in places that are on your doorstep or looking online. There's so many different ways you can do it now. But the first step is being interested and then looking to see how you can get more involved, because I think that's how we're making the gradual changes we're seeing over the last decade of the numbers increasing of girls and women getting involved in STEM.
Great. I have another one here this is for Nikki, and it's from Ashleen. Is the ratio of women to men working in STEM in the UK similar to the situation in Ireland? And I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Do you know, Nikki, if the ratio is similar in Ireland as it is to the UK?
Broadly speaking, I believe it is, but it obviously does also depend on what sector you're in. So from my background, marine conservation and biology, it is quite female dominated, especially in the NGO field. Again, looking similar to what other people were saying in the academic field, it might be the switch. And then where I am now, more in policy, it's quite an even spread actually. It is pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, I can concur with that as well. Certainly when at my degree level for biotechnology, it was male dominated, and then moving into environmental science, the PhD, it was female oriented. So I think it really does depend what field you're working in and what discipline you've chosen. A really good question here now from Rachel Oates, and she's asking, what is the funniest thing you have ever had to do as a scientist? So who will I ask that to first? So maybe Vicky, do you want to come in there and tell us if there's any strange or unusual things that you had to do as a scientist in your career, and then we'll move to Elspeth and ask the same question.
Well, I haven't been a scientist. I'm more
in
a technologist.
Tech, let's say in tech.
Funniest thing. Okay. Not really. We're kind of very. I've been just. All I do is organize a lot of things, and I really haven't any funny things that really happen. It's more like disaster recovery and things in the background, really. And I don't
probably
think that's funny.
You don't
it's
want
funny
to
you
share.
think in the background, but when you look back over it, but as in I'm kind of quite I suppose boring in the front side, kind of as nothing really funny happened because I can't see anything popping into my head right now. But definitely lots of things going wrong when I run things.
Elspeth, have you any stories there?
So I guess I can come at this from two different ways, because I was in research and then kind of made the switch over to science communication. I guess, I mean, it's not my research, but people that I worked with, because I come from the paleontological field, so dinosaurs and how things fossilize and things like that. So the people that were studying how fossils form, they decay stuff, right? And the thing about decaying stuff is that it smells really, really bad. So so I guess you don't want to be around those guys after they have been doing their, we call it taphonomy experiments. So that's the taphonomy is the process that an organism undertakes between its death and its eventual like recovery as a fossil. So that's certainly an interesting one. But if we move on to science communication now, I was involved in the Cheltenham Science Festival a good few years ago now, while I was still at the University of Manchester. And for the exhibit that we were on, we originally wanted to have a Triceratops skull. And that all sounds really cool, right?
Yeah.
We had permission from the Oxford Museum of Natural History to use their Triceratops skull. We were going to take it from Oxford to Cheltenham, not too far in the UK. But the thing is, the Triceratops skull was put there before they did like the modern doors, and we couldn't get it out the door. So that was certainly amazing. So yeah, my colleagues had to very quickly on the spot deal with that issue. But yeah, the thing with science communication though is you do all sorts of crazy stuff. Like if there's a way that you can think about linking science to all sorts of different things, you can definitely work it in there and keep people interested with what their hobbies are and the science. So it's a way of making all sorts of fantastic, interesting, and sometimes funny stories to tell using science as well. So, yeah.
Lovely. Great. Thank you for that. I was just going to ask, there's a question come in here. I think it's from, I've lost it. It's gone down the tracker a little bit who it actually came in from, but I think it was an interesting question. So who inspired you to be a scientist? So was there any one particular person or any particular event even that inspired you to become a scientist? And that's from Rachel Oates. So thank you, Rachel, for that question. Nikki, would you like to come in on that one?
Yeah, I think there's, I've been inspired by quite a few different things. So I grew up watching all these nature programs on BBC and things like that. So it was always an inspiration or a life goal to do that kind of thing, to see these animals and to kind of, I suppose, help with the conservation. But yeah, I think it's been with my dad and my sister going snorkeling down in Kerry, or swimming with fungi when I was very young. I was very lucky to do that kind of thing, and just generally being out in nature, being privileged enough to be able to be out in nature, and that's kind of where I've always been happiest. And I knew since I was 4 years old, well, back then I wanted to be a dolphin, now I just want to work with them, so I think I'm as close as I'm going to get. So I think going back to what we were saying earlier about how to inspire younger generations, I think kind of getting people out into nature, out into the classroom of the world, as well as in the classroom, is a huge motivator, and it encourages people that might not be traditionally academic minded to get passionate about these things. So yeah, that was been my inspiration.
Did anyone else want to come in on that? Have you a particular story on who inspired you or what inspired you to become a scientist?
I can jump in. I suppose I think definitely my dad. He's always been into technology. When I would remember when I was like 3 or 4, and I suddenly wake up in the middle of the night, 3 or 4, like in the morning, and I hear this click click noise, and I turn around and I saw my dad with this green glow on his face. That's how old I am, right? And it's a tape cassette for all those who don't know, and it's how they used to run programs. To when he brought back the very first kind of games console from Hong Kong in 1984. And it got me like into playing, like, so I was already very and so also surrounded by a lot of computers and technology, so I was very, and
Yep.
he let me play around with it, like computers. He let me open them up, change things, and as I got a bit older, I started to upgrade machines, and I started doing computers, and we started talk, and he talks to me a lot about things around tech. So I think it just got me very interested, and I was always curious, like at the stage when internet was still starting to was born, when you start creating your own pages and stuff. So I was curious, so I started coding, and I think that's how I got into it, as well as making like fun pictures and graphics, because initially that's what I wanted to do, graphic design. So I was always into art. So technology was in the background, but I didn't realize I ended up being a creative technologist before creative technology came along. So I'm in the middle of it all now, like between electronics, creative art, coding, graphic design. So it's all a big crossover in right now for me. So I'm very happy.
Good. So thank you, Dad, I think, for that one. I just wanted to maybe take a slightly more serious question now. And I'm going to direct this maybe at Geisha first. So it's in relation to the pay gap and inequalities of pay within gender diversity. So maybe, Geisha, have you had experience of this, or are you aware of inequalities between men and women in relation to pay, or indeed contract inequalities?
No, thanks. I do still think that there's an inequality in pay, or at least an inequality in progression and the opportunities for progression. And to an extent, I think we often sabotage ourselves in that as women, because we question whether or not we should be asking that for promotion that somebody else might already be asking for. And, so it's still an issue, and it's still an issue that in particular we don't see women in the higher roles in, let's say, for example, an institution like a university or in organizations and companies. And it's often we're more hesitant to put ourselves forward, or we don't see the same opportunities for promotion because we are women. We might have taken time out to stay at home with children. So I do still think that inequality is there. That often for men it is easier to progress than it is for women, and that's to a large extent where that comes from. And I think it's really important that we talk to each other, to our colleagues, about things such as contracts and pay, which we often shy away from, which means that we're not aware that maybe we are at a disadvantage to others.
Absolutely.
So having that conversation with others is really, really important. As I said earlier, it's really important because you find others are in the same position as you, so therefore you find support and solidarity in that. But also it's important to see where the opportunities are and put yourself forward.
Absolutely.
And realize that maybe you are at a disadvantage because your colleague who joined at a later point might have already asked for that promotion that you haven't asked for yet, or that pay raise that you haven't asked for. So it's often for us to kind of just put ourselves forward and at least ask. Which we often don't do. But as I said, it is still being held against us oftentimes that we have taken time off, for example, to look after family. And that's still something that occurs now, which means that we are slower to progress than others.
Absolutely. And I think we need to look at that support, family support, and work-life balances, I suppose, between men and women as well, and how we can maybe share that burden of raising families across men and women. And I think that's obviously something that we need to work with the government here in Ireland on, and we see much more progressive countries being able to manage that better. And I suppose that it's really topical at the moment, given the RT report that came out on Monday, which highlighted there was a gender pay gap of 14.5% across all sectors. So it would be interesting to see the stats just on the STEM sector as well. So maybe we'll have a look at those and share those with you after the call. We have a nice question here from Leila at Trinity Comprehensive, and she wants to know, what's the downside of being a woman in STEM? And I will ask maybe if, let me see now, Vicky, or actually no, if we could hear again from Elspeth. Could you come in on that one if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure. So in my experience, I guess where I am now, I haven't experienced too many downsides, and I'm really, really grateful for that. So I work for iCrag, which is an SFI funded research centre. I'm on the operations team, so kind of like the management team, and it's 70% women, and that's brilliant, and I'm so supported. And the centre itself has loads of women working in the centre, and it's really great. However, when I was still working in research, there was definitely kind of a culture where, albeit things were moving forward and not everybody was the same, but there were just times when I felt really uncomfortable. It was a geology department, and I think there was one full-time female member of staff in that department, albeit it wasn't the biggest department, but there was still this sort of, there was no one to look up to. And there's been quite a few scientific studies that show that one of the most important things for encouraging women into STEM is having female role models. And that's one of the things that we try and do at iCrag with the Girls into Geoscience initiative. But that's something that I definitely experienced. More recently, though, although I just said I haven't really experienced anything in my current job, science communication is great, but some of the things that iCrag does, we look at minerals and metals for a sustainable future, because I won't go into it, but we need lots and lots of minerals and metals for the sustainable future for our society. But part of that is linked to the mining industry. And although the mining industry is a lot better than it used to be, and I won't go into the environmental, etc., because we'll be here for another hour, but there's still a lot of, it's heavily male dominated, and there's no way around that. I'm not going to mess around with that. And the attitude of some of those men are not great. Like, I was sat down at lunch yesterday, and someone was talking about a mining industry event, and when my boss was like, oh, maybe I could go, the chat was like, oh no, wives aren't involved. And it's like, well, I'm not your wife, but okay. So it's attitude change. That's one of where
we need to do a little bit of work, I think. Yes, absolutely. Nikki, could I ask you maybe to jump in that question as well briefly? And Mary, if you could come in as well, just to check. I know both of you had mentioned you had something to say on the point.
Yeah, I was just, it's kind of relevant to this, and also back to what Geisha was saying as well. I think I've experienced myself, and I've also seen women in STEM often suffer from imposter syndrome, or lack of confidence or self-esteem, which can absolutely stand in our way in terms of kind of pushing our career forward. And unfortunately, it's something we do need to put our head above the parapet to be noticed and to progress. So it is a very well-known thing, and it's really nice that it is getting spoken about more, and people are becoming more aware of it. Hopefully not that it's kind of an acceptable feeling to have, but more of a something that we need to recognize in others and say, you know, it's the world that we live in, and it's okay to feel like that, but it's not the reality, and that we are brave and we are strong and we can do this, and we deserve everything that we're working towards. So yeah.
Well said. Mary, would you like to come in on that point as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was going to say that the upside of being a woman in STEM is that you can be a role model to so many people, and to young girls, young females coming up as well. We should never doubt the impact that you can have by being positive, by showing, by doing, and everything else. So I think that's the real upside to it, and we'll get more girls involved in STEM in a more sustainable way. There are more people they see as role models, talking about diverse careers in STEM.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't believe we're almost out of time. So we're going to move to the last question, and I want to make it a good one. So can you please all think about maybe what advice you would give to your younger self? So what would you have liked to have known that you now know when you were starting off in your career? And also then, what advice would you have for young people watching us here today that want to pursue a future career in STEM? And I'm going to start with Vicky, please, if you could come in on that one.
I know we're talking about STEM here, STEM, but I like to include the A in there. So STEAM,
Absolutely.
which is the art. So I'm briefly mentioned I liked art. I liked all the creativity goes along with it. So STEAM is for everyone. And definitely go outside your comfort zone. I've certainly done that quite a lot because you never know what opportunities may come out of it. And from what Nikki just said there, yes, if you want, role models is a big thing, but so we're all shy. I'm definitely a very shy person, even though I'm talking here. You can be that person to stand up and speak for your peers, shout out about them, talk about how awesome they are, promote their abilities. As I said, many of us are kind of introverts and we tend to like to do things in the background, but and this is like, as I said, I really appreciate, for you to provide a stage for myself and all of us here. But yes, for other people who are, there in the background, who are wants to talk to other people but are terribly shy, you can be and say, hey, look, talk to A, B, and C. They will for next time, so that's kind of quite important. And one last thing, just because you don't get what you want for the first time, it happens to me a lot, especially from secondary school when I wanted to go graphic design and I end up having to forced to repeat my leaving because my parents didn't want me to go to art college. There's always an alternative path, and it changes as you progress right throughout your studies and careers. So don't be afraid of change.
Super. Thanks, Vicky. Don't be afraid of change, and there's lots of ways to get you there. Geisha, if I could ask you to come in on the same question, please. So what advice would you have had for yourself, and what advice do you have for the young people watching here today?
Yeah, for me, really, the big thing is talk to others more. Start talking to the people you look up to. Start talking to the women who have the jobs that you want to have. Ask them how they got there, because they can give you invaluable advice that I never thought of asking for, because I was shy about approaching them. I felt that they made their own way, so therefore I should have to make my own way. But there are others who can help you and support you, and just don't ever be shy to ask others, because they're more than happy to share. And remember that when you've made it, turn around and tell others what they can do and help them, give them that hand up.
Great. Nikki, would you like to share your advice?
Yeah, very, very similar. Both of what's already been said before. Definitely be brave and be supportive, but also kind of recognize and embrace your strengths, but also what you think might be your weaknesses. These might be the things that will kind of set you different from other people, or give you the advantage in a job or a research or career or whatever. So yeah, just be brave and be open.
Great. And sorry, I know as time goes on, it's harder and harder to add on additional advice because the advice that's been given so far has been really, really valuable. But Elspeth, could you jump in maybe with some additional advice if you have any?
Yeah, sure. So my key piece of advice that I will repeat until I go blue in the face is do what you enjoy and you will succeed. So I failed my physics A level badly because I didn't like it. Study what you enjoy. Don't study what someone else thinks that you should do. And yeah, do what you enjoy and you will succeed. But also advice to my younger self is that PhD is not everything. You don't need a PhD to succeed in science. Some jobs, perhaps, but most of the time, no. So yeah, that's
Super.
me.
Do what you enjoy, and actually do what you enjoy, and you will never have to work a day in your life. I would add to that as well. And certainly I love my job, and I think that makes it just makes for such a nice I suppose work-life balance, because it never really feels like work. It's always good fun. Mari, if I could ask you for your closing advice on maybe what you would have told your earlier self, and then what you would give to the young people on the call.
Yeah, well, I think, my younger self, look, I've ended up in the dream job, so any advice I would have given myself any earlier on wouldn't have got me down this path. So the thing is that I think people need to explore more to understand more that the opportunities are out there. I think we are still talking about careers in STEM, careers in STEAM in sort of stovepipe ways. There is so much more. You can be anything you want in that, and always remember now, there's no such thing as a career for life. There's no such thing as a job for life. You have the opportunity to do little bits and bobs and move on. And if things don't suit you, the opportunities are there more than they ever were when I was in school. So just be brave and explore what's out there. There's lots of information online and everything else. And just as one of the other panelists said, just ask. See a job you like and ask how people got it or how they did things. And sometimes the pathways that people find into a role are not the way you think that they should have been.
Absolutely. And this week is definitely the week to ask the questions. So we have lots of STEM and sustainability activities running at the Rediscovery Centre here this week, but obviously they're running throughout the country. We would love to thank all our panelists here today. Apologies from Fionnuala wasn't able to join us today, so we no doubt will have her on a panel again in the very near future. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Elspeth. Thank you, Geisha. Thank you, Nikki. And thank you, Vicky. Thank you, everyone that was involved in running this event. It's been really good. We could talk for hours, no doubt. And we would love to thank, obviously, Science Foundation Ireland for funding this event and the support of Dublin City Council, as always. Thank you, and have